it was really hard to get that model to change, to get anybody to pay attention that, hey, this is really broken. This is not the way people get information anymore. And you're assuming that people should just trust you when they don't know who you are. They don't know where you're coming from. They don't know why you're saying what you're saying. And they might not view you as a member of their community. And you might not be a member of their community.
Hey, what's up? This is Dion Lewis, clinical health coach and host of the Healthy Project podcast. Now, the research shows that social determinants can have a greater impact on your health more than healthcare or lifestyle choices. The purpose of this podcast is to discuss how to improve health and reduce health inequity by speaking to healthcare professionals, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast, give it a review. Or you can also make a donation to the Healthy Project using the link in the description. It takes 30 seconds and it's super easy. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Now let's get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Healthy Project podcast. I'm your host, Dion Lewis. I have a great guest in the building today. He's the CEO of the Public Good Project and now the Public Good Network, which I'm excited to learn more about that as well. We have Dr. Joe Smyser. Dr. Smyser, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, before we get into the topic at hand, how about you tell the people a little bit about yourself and what kind of gets you up in the morning?
Sure. Yeah. So my Ph.D. is in public health, and my master's is as well. So I've been in public health for a long time, about 20 years. And my focus is always been on health communications, which is more about how do you communicate public health topics or science to the public. So that's what I'm passionate about. I read about it. It gets me up in the morning, and I pay attention to it, and it puts me to sleep at night. So I'm very lucky because I really like what I do, and I know not everybody gets to do that. So I feel like my job is also my passion and my calling. I've been at PGP, Public Good Projects, for just about 6 years, and we've grown a lot during that time. We're about 70 people, all told, and we're headquartered in New York City with our administration office in Washington, D.C. But we're spread all over because of the pandemic. We haven't had an office in quite a while, and so a lot of our staff are all over the U.S. But I moved around a lot, lived abroad, lived all over the U.S. And I guess that pretty much sums me up.
Right. I mean, and it's a good thing that you really enjoy what you do, because from what it sounds like with PGP, you guys are tackling a lot of challenging issues that I feel like some people would lose a lot of sleep over. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Public Good Project and, what you guys are, the challenges you guys are facing and trying to battle right now?
Well, we're led by people who have a background in public health. So usually they've worked in that field for a number of years, like myself. Mm-hmm. But we've also got journalists on staff, and some marketing and communications people, a pretty big research team. So these are people who are coming from a university setting, experience, writing peer-reviewed scientific articles and doing those sorts of studies, and then a whole creative team. So people who know how to make videos and animation and illustrations and designs. So we all work together across those teams to create simple, easy to understand, and hopefully entertaining, interesting ways of getting important health information to different populations, different communities. So we work all over the U.S., but we also work abroad too. We're UNICEF's partner in all over the world, and helping communities and UNICEF country offices in a whole bunch of different countries understand what's going on across social media and across television and radio. So we look for, are there gaps in people's understanding around important topics like polio outbreaks or COVID-19 vaccines, or really just about everything under that umbrella of public health, which is a lot of stuff. Opioids, for example.
Right.
Um, so we pay attention to what are people seeing, what are people saying, what do the health experts want people to know and understand, and maybe what's the gap between what they think people ought to know and what people currently understand or are currently exposed to. And oftentimes we come in and we build a bridge between those two. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun job because it's although it's always around public health, the methods that we use change a lot depending upon the community that we're trying to serve. So it's every day is a little bit different, which keeps it interesting and fun.
Right. I can only imagine how to provide critical information through TikTok, which I feel like would be maybe have its challenges, but pretty interesting. You know what I mean? Recently, I know you've talked about a lot of the different public health issues and things you guys are tackling, but the most current one, I'm sure probably the one that you've been dealing with the most as of lately has been the COVID-19 pandemic. What did COVID-19 or this pandemic, what did it expose about, how people receive information, and what were some of the challenges as you're trying to figure out to get people the correct information?
I think if we're talking about in the US, I think we knew this before the pandemic hit, but I think it exposed it in much more clear detail, much more graphic detail, that the way we've set up public health in this country is really backwards. We have this legacy in the US of top down. So there's people who go to school for public health or some science degree, and then they go work for a federal government agency that focuses on public health, or a state health department or a local health department. And all of your training, if you're one of those people, is, okay, I'm going to have my talking points, and those talking points are going to be approved by a PR person. And then I'm going to stand in front of an American flag, and I'm going to give you my talking points. And then I just expect you to listen and do what I say. That's a really antiquated idea of how humanity functions. And so I think a lot of us knew that, but it was really hard to get that model to change, to get anybody to pay attention, that, hey, this is really broken. This is not the way people get information anymore. And you're assuming that people should just trust you when they don't know who you are. They don't know where you're coming from. They don't know why you're saying what you're saying. And they might not view you as a member of their community, and you might not be a member of their community. And there's a lot of other people that actually know a lot more than you do about what people need to know and where they're at. And those people should be given a lot more authority and a lot more trust and power than they have been. And so I think that, again, like that was kind of understood. Like there's people who work, for example, in community health who go door to door, like public health nurses or promotoras in Spanish speaking communities. And they're badasses. I mean, they should be the most respected people in public health, but they're often not. They're often sort of disregarded because they're walking down streets and they're using their own shoe leather to work with people every day. And the people who got most of the notoriety were the people who had the privilege of standing in front of that American flag and talking like to a television crew. And so I think the whole thing flipped during the pandemic, and this myth of the best way to communicate health to people and essential information to people got turned on its head. And everybody really couldn't claim that what we were doing worked anymore, which I actually think it's great. If you look at who should be involved in figuring out what communities need, it's the community. It's community organizations, it's community leaders. And they, in my experience, like I said, I've worked in public health for 20 years. They're not often at the table. They're not often invited to be at that table, and they often aren't leading the conversation. And they should be. They should not only be at the table; they should be leading it. So I might know what the science says about what people should know about COVID-19 vaccines, for example, or flu shots, or whatever the topic may be. That's not enough. I then need to go and talk to faith leaders and community organizers, and I need to 90% of the strategy to reach people should come from them, not from me. And that just wasn't done before the pandemic. There's little instances, little good examples of where it's done, mostly from community health, which is this little underfunded part of public health.
Yeah.
But now I think it's obvious that's where we need to get to. So it's kind of the silver lining of the misery of this whole pandemic. My worry now is that we're going to backslide. Like Americans have notoriously short memories. And I already kind of see it where those community organizations and those community leaders that were involved, that were allowed to be involved, were brought in, are now suddenly not being invited as often as they were. And that I think that's not good. And I really hope people don't allow it to happen.
Right.
You know,
like almost seen as, thank you for your participation in this little project that we're running. Let us now we're going to start doing some other things where the other things that they're trying to focus on, the people in the community can still be involved with and probably know more about the behavior of that community than someone outside of that.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Or you saw it with, like, you see it every day with trust. There's really good reasons for a lot of communities in the U.S. not to trust the government and not to trust, quote, scientists. Really, really good reasons, and those have to be validated before a conversation can even start, and that takes work and trust building. And what we saw a lot before the pandemic was just a lack of interest in putting in the work to build that trust. It wasn't built into program plans, for example. They didn't even build in time to have meetings with community members. It just wasn't part of the funding cycle. It just
Right.
wasn't how everybody thought about this work. So I really, really hope that we don't go back to that. It's been interesting. What we've seen so far is, civic organizations, and their job was getting people registered to vote. They had to pivot and they had to get people vaccinated. They had to get people the information, and they changed their whole organization to do that. Or churches, like, all of a sudden they became vaccination centers. And now what I see, at least, is all of those people that did that, all those organizations want to stay involved. It's been 3 years of doing that work, and they see the power of it and how they could help people. And then I do see a little bit of, like, the people who think that they own that aren't in community organizations, that are more on the government side, or they kind of want to go back to business as normal, as usual, because it's easier. But yeah, I mean, I just that's not the way to go.
Right.
So,
I know. And it goes back to what you said earlier, is that trust factor. I feel like a lot of these community-based organizations and these collaborations worked really well because it's harder to trust someone. It's hard for someone who's white to go into a black community and say, hey, trust me. They would much rather trust someone they know who may not have the correct information. That's where, my next question, goes is, or my next question is how do you battle that? Which is a term that I just learned, the infodemic. How does that, yeah. How has that, what are your thoughts on that? How's that contributed to, misinformation in some of these, underserved populations and communities?
Well, first I would just want to say, like, there's been so much focus on, and I understand why, but there's been a lot of focus and talking in the media and other places around, like, okay, there's a white public health person or a white scientist coming into like a black community or a Hispanic community, and they're not listened to, and how do we mitigate that? How do we work around that? But every time I hear that, that's true. Okay, that happens, but it's not really that different than any community. If I'm working in Appalachia and I come in and I'm from Washington, D.C., why would anyone trust me or believe what I have to say? I'm not from there. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I don't know how it works.
Right.
That's just sort of human nature. I think the difference is that Black and brown communities have experienced horrific things happening to them for hundreds of years.
Right. So the guard's already up to begin
Yeah,
with.
the guard's already up. Yeah, as it should be. So I think the part of it's just like, oh yeah, wouldn't it be nice if there was no structural racism or yeah, that's not real.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
We gotta account for it. So, but the infodemic's interesting. It's scary, but it's intellectually it's interesting. What happened when the pandemic hit? All information about anything about the pandemic just shot through the roof. So like nobody I knew in 2019 or earlier could tell me who manufactured the vaccine that they got. No, why? I got the flu shot. Okay, couldn't tell you the company that made it.
Right.
Didn't matter. But now, like everybody knows the name of the company who made their COVID-19 shot.
It was a thing. Like, who did yours?
Yeah,
Moderna.
yeah,
Interesting.
that's
It's like,
wild.
what do you know about Moderna?
Do I really care? Yeah, it was just interesting. So I don't think we're ever going to go back from that now. I mean, now people know the names of all those companies and how much money they got and their research processes. And I think that's actually pretty cool that we all, it's on our minds now. But when all of the information spiked, like, okay, what do quarantines mean? What do mandates mean? Vaccine passports, is that real? All that stuff that we all think about all the time now. What came along with that was all the bad information also went up. What was like a really small little group of people before the pandemic that were incentivized for their own reasons to spread bad information, which researchers now call misinformation. They got a lot more powerful because the demand for their product increased. Their product is conspiracy theories, myths, and they became much more prominent. So they got a lot more views on their videos on social media. They start, the little documentaries that they make suddenly got 1 million views. The books that they wrote that no one bothered to read now are like bestsellers on Amazon. And so I think all that just kind of made this perfect storm of, okay, well, that stuff's finding me now, whether I want to look for it or not. It's just everywhere. And then there was also like a lot of disingenuous leveraging of historical trauma and current trauma. So anti-vaxxers, white nationalists, anti-government people, they all latched on. They all saw that vaccines, for example, or reactions to our response to a pandemic were really polarizing. And so they saw, all right, well, that's going to get me more clicks. That's going to get me more attention. I'm going to stop focusing on all these other talking points I was using in 2019, and I'm just going to talk about vaccines. I'm just going to talk about the trauma inflicted on Black and brown communities by unethical, immoral scientists or government agencies. And that's all I'm going to talk about now. And so, and then they started showing up to Black Lives Matter walks and marches, and trying to get people interested in their cause, and their cause. And so all that's kind of exploded now, and now it's much bigger than it used to be. It's much more coordinated. They have much more money. They have much more power. A lot of their talking points are the talking points of one of the two parties in our two-party political system. The whole thing has changed. So it's not a niche movement anymore. It's now a highly coordinated information machine, and a lot of that information is not true, just done for their own purposes. I think if you combine that with everybody's trying to find out what's real, and just understandable confusion and concern, it is that kind of that maelstrom of like that cyclone of I can't even tell anymore. What to believe. Yeah. You add that to like, this is a new disease in a new pandemic. We're learning new stuff every month, and that's how science works. Unfortunately, adapt and overcome constantly. And so you look at talking points used by health leaders or government leaders 6 months ago, and they're totally different than they are now. Right. And it just, if you're confused already, it just looks like nobody knows what they're doing. There's no truth
Yep.
anywhere. And so I'm just going to listen to whatever, what my neighbor's saying, because
Right.
why not? I totally get that. It actually makes a lot of sense. And I don't think there's actually a good answer. I think we're still figuring out what do we do about this. So the infodemic just means a massive amount of information about a disease or about a health topic. That's all that means. Misinformation means information that isn't true, spreading around. And then there's this other term called disinformation, which means I know that it isn't true, but I'm sharing it anyway for my own purposes. So
Mm.
all three of those things collided
That
and then rolled
happens.
together all the time.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Oh my
God.
gosh. Yeah. Every minute of every day. We have these, so we measure all this stuff. So we have these charts that show like, all right, well, here's all the stuff that wasn't true about, vaccines, for example, 2019, 2020 March hits, and it's just, shoo, and it hasn't gone down since. It's just huge, exponential. It's overwhelming, and it's hard to even wrap your head around what do you do about it. And it's not just in the U.S. It's every country that we're in is dealing with the same stuff. It's people are really concerned and they're really confused and they just want to know what to do. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They just want the truth, and it's just
Right.
really, really hard to tell where that truth is.
Yeah, because depending on where you get your information, you could be talking to someone that really looks like they know what they're talking about. You're like, but you going that extra mile, most people just won't do it because like, oh, well, he looks trustworthy, he looks the part, and he's everything he's saying to me makes sense. So I'm just gonna roll with it, even if you may not still really know.
Yeah, or like I completely agree. And to build on that example, it's also like, okay, so there's a doctor or there's a reporter who says something. Maybe I would know as Joe Smyser that there were things that don't make sense in what I just heard. Okay, I've been in public health for 20 years. That's not your average person. So I'm your average person is just seeing that, and then they want to do their own research. So they go and they click the links, for example, that come along with what that person said. But all those links are cherry picked. So they're going down
Mhm.
this rabbit hole of like everything is confirming the bias of the thing that I just read. It's really, really hard, and it takes a lot of time to go say, okay, that doesn't totally ring true. I'm going to find a completely different set of information, and I'm going to compare the two. And over time, I'm going to figure out where reality is in the middle. That's really complicated actually to do, and usually for most people it takes someone training you how to do it, and also it takes time. And who has that time? Who has 5 hours every day to go to go examine all the like? No, that's
Right.
not realistic.
I got to figure this out and
Yeah,
see
I
what the
got
truth
30
is.
seconds for the news. That's reality. So it's just, yeah, it's really hard. It's really complicated.
Yeah. So, what are, I mean, with that said, where can someone go? Like, if someone wants to know the truth, are there trusted websites? Are there trusted places that someone can go to where they can feel comfortable that this is appropriate information for me to consume?
Well, I think that, so I think that like your major news sites are still reputable. I think because they do have teams of people who, they'll get fired if what they write isn't true. So
Right.
they're
Right.
incentivized. I still think that the federal government, the state government sites are accurate. They're slow to be updated though, and they don't have all the information most people need. If I want the basics of vaccines, I can go to CDC's website, but CDC isn't built to be like minute by minute update. It's not a news organization.
Oh,
It's just
right.
basic information, and that's it. And that's what they do. More and more, I think the solution is all of those old sources of information are still important. I really believe in community organizations, and I really believe in these organizations that were built or gained a lot of importance because of the pandemic. The Black Nurses Association, for example, like there's organizations like that where these are people who they are doing it for the right reasons. They know what they're talking about. They know the needs of their community that they're serving, and they're doing all the work of going through all that information and then distilling it down. And here's what you need to know. And they're really active, and they're active on social media, and they're like doing talks all the time. And there's organizations at churches that are doing the same thing. Small business associations are doing it. All of that kind of work, I think, is actually where most people should go for their information. And I think already have been for the last 2.5 years or so. But yeah, I think it's, in some ways it's simple. In some ways it's what it always has been. Okay, well, who's just trying to give me information and not for their own purposes? What's their stake in this? Well, it actually is just their job to give good information. And okay, great. Well, I can probably trust them. And then if it's like, how does this affect me as a person in my own community in real life? I think there's a lot of organizations now who are out there that should be trusted. They might be wrong 1 out of 50 times, but that's still a really good ratio. And they deserve the trust. And that kind of reflects also like just sort of the media landscape in general. There's so much out there. We have to pick and choose what streaming movie or television show we watch, what blog we read, what podcast we listen to. It's just unfortunately part of the process of being an adult now is just going through and going like, all right, well, these are good for me. These give me the information that I need, and I trust where this is coming from. And they're not trying to manipulate me, or, everything isn't a breaking news alert every 30 seconds. It's just like, this seems like it's a measured, responsible way of giving me information.
Right.
So that's what I do.
Right. That's awesome. So, we have the Public Good Project, and now we have, which I don't know if it's been a couple months or if it's how recent it is, but the Public Good Network. What's the difference with those two? Are there more similarities than differences?
Well, so PGN, Public Good News, but we just call it
news.
PGN.
Sorry, news, not network.
Oh no, it's fine. It just launched, so I haven't even said it out loud that many times. So PGN is, about 2 months old. The idea there is community organizations, I think, are the way forward. I'm really, really worried about the state of our country. It's really hard for me to be optimistic about it. I just feel a lot of anxiety about the future of our country. And I feel like a lot of the progress we were making in talking about race and ethnicity and truth and accountability, the progress we made in women's rights and voting rights and the huge issues that should be like at the core of our country, I feel like we're backsliding on all those. That's how it feels to me. And I feel like more and more people are like, the sources of information that we get are forcing us to be further and further away from each other in a really disingenuous, gross way. Ways to consolidate power. So I feel like PGN is not the answer to that. But if we're looking at just health, which has become this polarizing topic, if you believe in vaccines or you don't, or you like think the CDC is worth existing or you don't, that's like your whole identity now. It's part of who you are as a person, unfortunately. It doesn't seem like we can have conversations about these things anymore. So what PGN does is it looks for all the community organizations out there that are doing good work for the right reasons and that have a legacy in their community. They've earned that trust. A lot of those community organizations don't have a health person on their team. They're small and because they have to be. They don't have a lot of funding. They have to be nimble. And so what PGN does is it gives them health news based on what they tell us they want. So they tell us what their community needs to know, what they're hearing on the streets. Then we give them the news, and that news gets posted through their social media accounts and in other ways, like their newsletters, the way that they communicate. And that's it. In a nutshell, it's just an attempt to use trusted voices, trusted messengers, and have that feedback loop really critically where they say, here is what we need to know. And then we give them that instead of us just deciding what they need to know. And then if you scale that up, which you can do with technology these days, you scale it up, you can do that for thousands of community organizations. And my hope is that that's a really different way of doing the news. And it's not super flashy. It's not divisive. We don't have breaking news alerts every 30 seconds. We're not covering the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. It's just, we're just giving people basic information that they need to know and we know that because they told us. And then we're done. Like that was our job for the day. I'm excited about it because we piloted it with Rockefeller, a foundation. So we did it. We've already done it in a number of communities, and the community organizations we worked with said it was great, and it really helped. So we took that and then we built it into a bigger thing. PGP is a public health nonprofit, and PGN is under PGP. So PGN has its own team, its own funding. It does what it does independently. And then there's the public good projects, which is out there. They don't do anything other than public health, but they're not a news organization. PGN's a news organization.
Right. So being that even though it's not going to be it's not a huge solution, but it's a solution to help those communities that need good information.
Yeah, we were looking at it. We just more and more, I just felt like I don't think the answer is another television station. I think the answer is empowering the people who've shown through their work that they deserve to be who people turn to, and they need to be empowered to continue to do that. I didn't care if PGN became this huge, famous news organization. I cared about, can we be in the background and just give the people who are in the front lines what they need to do their jobs better? And that is what excites me about it, is those community organizations saying, this is great. We want more of it. Like, that's awesome. I don't need, a television commercial saying PGN. It's, right. Doesn't matter to me.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. Joe, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I want to be mindful of your time, but I really appreciate the conversation. Anybody that's listening that wants to learn more about you, PGP or PGN, where can they find you?
Well, so if they go to Public Good Projects, our website. So they can Google Public Good Projects. It's the first thing that comes up. There's publicgoodprojects.org is our website, and then PGN has a website too. So you can just Google PGN and it'll bring you there. There's social media accounts and a website, and it's a news website, and that would be great. I mean, yeah, it will help us out the more attention we get. But again, I think we're not doing it for that kind of attention. We're not asking for donations from anybody. It's funded by foundations and groups like that. So we don't take donations from individuals. It's more about, if you can trust your local community organization, that's where I would ask people to spend their time. You don't need to go to PGP's website. Go to the websites you already know and trust.
Awesome. And I don't know why I asked that question, because I always put the links in the description.
Oh, I appreciate it.
It's just a habit to ask. It's like, they're going to be in the description anyway, but like, it's just that habit. Well, Joe, again, thank you so much for being on. I really, truly appreciate the conversation, and I learned something. And everyone, thank you for listening to the Healthy Project podcast. I'll holler at you next time.